Hi everyone, welcome to another Fireside chat with one of our all-star alumni. I'm really excited to be chatting to her today. With me, I've got Cecilia White, who is a senior product manager and producer at Riot Games and product school alumna. Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So yeah, let's dive right into it. So I would love to know, what have you been up to since you got certified as a product manager with product school?
So yeah, that was 6 years ago. I started off my career in product management at a startup in San Francisco. And then I decided to move to Southern California to get more involved in the entertainment industry. And I was a product manager at a startup. And then I went to Ticketmaster for a few years and was a senior product manager for iOS and Android apps. And then I went to the Walt Disney Company for a couple of years as well. And for that position, I was a senior product manager working on different types of technology for Lucasfilm and Pixar and animation studios. And that was also very exciting because I was involved in all different kinds of technology. And most recently, I've moved to Riot Games. And so now I'm involved in the video game industry as a senior product manager, and I'm working on direct to consumer products, something very exciting that is launching in a couple of months.
Awesome. And is there anything specific to the entertainment industry, something like any unique challenges that come up for you in your work as a PM?
Yeah, I think that the most unique challenge is that I've come from the Silicon Valley where I spent 15 years, and that was specifically working for tech companies like Apple, where they just make technology for technology's sake. And coming down to Los Angeles and working for entertainment companies, they're not technology companies, but they need technologists. And so I'm in a really unique position where I'm much more of a technical product manager just because I have to be, because when I've worked for Disney and even Ticketmaster, I'm not surrounded by people who understand technology. They understand how to entertain people, whether it's through TV shows or video games. And so the experience that I bring is to translate, this is the type of technology that we can build and we can deliver, and this is how it's going to enhance the consumer experience. So what I really love about working in technology and entertainment is that I feel like everything I do really has a purpose. And also as a technologist, I get to support people in the creative industry. So the actual artists who create the video games, the animators who create movies for animation studios. That part I really love. And I think it's so much more fulfilling to work in the entertainment industry.
And do you think it's vastly different to the other industries that you've worked in?
Yes, I do. I think that working in pure technology, whether it's Google or Apple, you are definitely working on consumer products, but how people are going to use that technology is never clear. So whether you're working on search engine optimization or you're working on, specific products, it's interesting in the Silicon Valley because I think for the past 20 years, there's been all of this technology that's been created and no one was ever sure how it was actually going to be used or implemented. But I think coming down here to Southern California, like it's very clear, like every time we're building a website or we're spinning up a new service or a new cloud service, like we understand exactly how it's going to basically help entertain the masses. So I think that understanding exactly how a consumer is going to use the technology is really important. But that wasn't always clear in every industry I've worked in. But it's clear in this one, whether people are home streaming or playing video games or, watching shows, like I really understand the exact impact of what I'm working on.
And how have you seen product management change in the roles that you've had? Is product management at Pixar very different to product management at Riot Games, or are the core principles still more or less the same?
So I do think that it has changed dramatically. One of the things I love about product school is that it created a really nice foundational understanding of what product management is. And I can always go back to those principles. So I know as a product manager that I have to think about value. I have to think about, what we're actually delivering to customers, how to create that customer feedback loop, how to have iterative development. And so I'm always focused on, why am I building this product? Who is it for? How is it going to be used? How can I optimize it? But I found that product management sometimes is more than just thinking about the vision and the strategy, and it really depends on the needs of the business. So for example, when I was at Disney, I did not have my own team of engineers. I was often working with vendors and outsourcing. And so that was challenging because the degree of control that I had was a lot less because I wasn't working with my own team. And at Riot Games, I have a team of over 20 software engineers that I get to work with every single day. And having that closer relationship is really important. But the job duties have definitely expanded. Product managers are expected to flex. They are expected to be project managers. They're expected to be scrum masters, delivery managers, project managers. So I found that my role just keeps expanding, but I try to keep bringing it back to product at the end of the day, and really, working with my colleagues to help them understand, like, how do you think about product development? What is product thinking? So that we're all focused on the same thing. In an ideal world, everybody on my team thinks like a product manager. That's my goal at the end of the day. Like, let's all care about the product equally.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best path forward if everyone's got like the same level of love and care for their product. So I'd love to take you on a trip down memory lane to those 6 years ago. So you're one of like the OG students of product school. What was it like? Like, what was the teaching like? How did you enjoy the course? Yeah, just anything you want to tell us about what it was like.
Yeah, I felt so fortunate. It was back in 2015, and I remember it was the spring, and I was considering a career change. I was working for a startup across the street from the Transamerica Pyramid in the financial district in San Francisco. And at that moment, I was a learning manager, and I had a team, and I felt like I'd kind of reached the pinnacle of where I wanted to be as a learning manager, an instructional designer, basically. And the reason I wanted to get into product management is that I wanted to be at the inception of software development. I wanted to be the decider when it came to features and priority and what we were going to build for the customer. And I actually just started Googling product certifications, product school. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe I'd have to go back to school and get an MBA, but that's really hard to do when you're working full time. So I was really fortunate to find that product school was practically across the street from where I was. And I clearly remember it was every Saturday for 8 hours. It was a 2-month course. It was a beautiful brick building, and everything was super modern. What I absolutely loved was that I got to meet other people. So I met about maybe 8 to 10 people who were also in my class. And I've still connected with those folks on LinkedIn and been able to see their progression. And it was a fantastic course because at that moment, product management was still relatively new in the Bay Area. And there was a lot of confusion about, is it project management? Is it program management? Like, exactly what is it? And how should people approach it? And what kind of methodology should they have? And I found the course to be so enlightening and really fun and highly collaborative. I got to work on projects with the folks on my team. And really the best part was being able to build a portfolio so I could showcase something at the end. And also meeting people from just different companies and facets of life. Like, I'd come from more of a marketing background, and I was meeting engineers, designers, who also wanted to move into product management. And I remember the first day we kind of just talked about like where our backgrounds were. And that first day we got to figure out what is our personal superpower that we bring to the table. And I really loved that approach because it was so empowering to think that it doesn't matter what your background is or where you've come from, like, anyone can transition to product management if you have a passion for customers and you have a passion for ideas, basically. And yeah, it was just one of the best experiences of my life.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's so nice to hear. So a lot's changed in the last 6 years, well, in the last 18 months as well, I think it's safe to say. What advice would you give for people who are looking to get into product management now? Maybe like if they were specifically looking to get into the creative industries, what sort of things should they do? How should they approach that career move?
Yeah, I think what is really wonderful is that wherever you are in your career, whether you're in engineering or in customer service, or whatever your background happens to be, every company is practically a software company. Carlos actually posted that on LinkedIn yesterday, which was really enlightening. And what I did personally was I found a gap in the business where we were not optimizing our software, and there were a lot of bugs, and there were issues and problems. There were issues with the flows, and so I actually just started building a presentation of how I would redesign the website and how I would make it better, a better customer experience. And so I think if you have a current position and you want to move into product management, there's a couple of things you can do. You can try to look around your company and figure out how could this product be better? What is a new idea for a product? I was lucky enough to work at a startup where the CEO had an open door policy, and I basically went in and pitched myself for the position. But even if you don't have that opportunity, you can start shadowing other product managers in your organization. You can ask them, how they think about solving problems, because that's another part of it. I think that even if you are a software engineer or a designer, there are principles that you can take away from product management, and you can start applying it to your job that you currently have. So my advice is definitely to look around where you are at your current situation and think, if I was the product manager, what would I do to improve this? And then you can either, go the route of pitching yourself or applying for the job. But that's why product school is so great, because if you don't have a portfolio, you can build a portfolio, and then you can use that to showcase your ideas. And if you're working at a company, you can go to product school, you can build a portfolio around a case study that's applicable to your company. So that would be my advice, is just figure out a way to kind of position yourself for a product position, and definitely shadow and mentor somebody at your company who is in product management. People do that to me. I have a delivery manager at Riot who has started to set up one-on-ones with me because she wants to be a product manager. So I'm there to coach her and mentor her and tell her this is basically what my job is. And I think that for the most part, all the product managers I have ever met are usually outgoing, gregarious, talkative, and want to share our best practices, because I love being a product manager, and I'm willing to help anybody else who wants to have that role as well. So I would encourage people to reach out to product managers in their company and ask them for guidance and advice.
So basically, product managers are just the best kind of people in general.
I think that we are. I think that, it was funny. I went to ProductCon in Los Angeles in 2018, I believe. Was it 2018 or 2019? And I just met so many other people who were just so fun and easy to talk to. So yeah, that is my impression of product managers, is that we are talkative. That's part of our job, is you have to be able to articulate things, and friendly as well, because we have to work with so many different kinds of people. That's our job, is to sell the vision to everybody and get them just as excited as we are.
That's such a nice summary of what product management is. So sort of related to that, one of the things that we hear a lot coming out of the community is that soft skills are absolutely the bread and butter of every PM skill set. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%. I had a few people that I worked with early on who were senior product managers when I was just starting out, and they gave me a lot of career advice. And the best career advice I got was to never introduce a new idea in a meeting to a bunch of people, to go to each person and figure out, what is their stake in this product? What would their objections be? What are their concerns? How can I get them invested in this product idea, so that when you do have a bigger meeting and you do want to introduce a vision and a strategy, you've already done the relationship building to figure out how this works for everybody, so that you're able to position the value more. But it is a lot of face-to-face, whether it's through Zoom or in person. I found that in my career, sending an email, sending a Slack, it's just never as effective as actually just talking to somebody face-to-face, because you have to get buy-in from engineering, from marketing, from design, and you have to work with everybody to get them on the same page. And traditionally, product managers, unless you're higher up, you don't usually have any direct reports. You have to lead by influence, which is very challenging, because even though folks say that being a product manager is like being a mini CEO, you're not actually the CEO of the business, but you do have to champion your product, and therefore you have to get buy-in from everyone.
It's all of the responsibility and none of the power, as I've heard a million times.
Yes, that is a true statement. But there's a lot of joy as well, I would say, because a lot of product managers have to walk the line between idealism and pragmatism. Like, we know that we can only do so much, yet we still want to reach for the stars. And being able to have that North Star and the guiding principles, once again, it can really help the team shoot for the moon. And even if you don't land there, it's nice to be among the stars.
That's such a nice way of thinking about it. And now that you've been in product for a few years, are there any, when you look back at your early years in product, are there any mistakes that you were sort of routinely making that you wish you could go back and say, do this differently?
I became a product manager in San Francisco, and it was true trial by fire. I was not very technical when I started out as a product manager, and I wasn't sure how technical I had to be. I had heard in the early days of product management, and even in my position, that I didn't have to be technical in order to be able to build a good customer experience or understand product. And it's true, but when you think about it, your closest relationship that you're going to have is with your engineers. And you do have to be able to be flexible and adaptable to their needs. And so I would say that the mistakes I made early on were not asking enough questions. It's actually interesting. If you continue to ask questions of your engineers, you don't have to be that technical in order to understand what your options are. So when I was starting out, I would say, this is what we're going to build. This is what it's going to look like. And the engineers were like, okay, well, here's how we're going to do it. But in retrospect, I should have asked questions like, what are our different options? If we go with option A, how long is it going to take? If we go with option B, how long is it going to take? What are going to be the trade-offs? What are we going to have to do in a year in order to, upgrade or revisit this? And so I think as a product manager, what you really want to understand from engineering are your options, so that even if you don't understand the technology thoroughly, you understand what the implications are, because engineers are truly wonderful partners, but it is important to understand the impact of the choice that you make. So whether, like, you're building an app, for example, if you go with a native app versus a hybrid app versus a web app, those will give you completely different user experiences and functionalities. And so just really being able to understand from the engineers, what do I get and what do I don't get with, this platform that we're using or this technology that we're using. And there are details that are very important to engineers that I did not learn the first day, like how to write acceptance criteria the way that they wanted it, how to write a user story the way that they wanted it. But I will say to product managers who are starting out, don't be scared. If you just have the principles of understanding what a user story is, there is room for growth. And so now what I do, even though I've been doing this for 6 years, when I meet with engineers for the first time or I meet with designers for the first time, I ask them, how do you like to work? Like, how do you want your work to be structured? How do you want me to hand things off to you? How do you want to collaborate? And it's the same thing with design. There are designers who just want a user story. And then there are designers who want me to build a wireframe or want me to kind of build out something to give them a framework to work with. And engineers are the same way. There are some engineers who just want the user story and they'll fill everything out. And then there are some who they want to understand all the flows and they want to partner with you on everything. But those are the best kinds of engineers and designers, is the one from like day one that you can partner with and that you do everything together. So that was another learning thing, was that you just have to start day one together. And anytime that you're ahead or they're behind, if you're not on the same page, if you're not in lockstep, it can cause a lot of communication issues. And with that, you should also never assume anything. So don't be afraid to ask as many questions as humanly possible. And don't be afraid of what you don't know. Just keep focusing on what do you want that user experience to be, and use that, again and again to bring that back to developers and designers, and they will help you figure out what is that best user experience.
So when you're talking with engineers as a product manager, you're sort of like half translator, half diplomat, and then the rest of you is product manager.
Yes. And I think with engineers, that is the most difficult relationship you will have as a product manager, and it is the most important one. They have to feel that you understand what they're doing to a certain degree, so that you have respect for what they're doing and that you have some understanding of the complexity and also how long things realistically take. So I spend a lot of time with my engineers asking them to just walk me through the flows that they go through, the challenges that they go through, what kinds of problems are they trying to solve before they can even start to build what I'm asking for. And really respecting them by asking them, what do you think is the best way to do this? And what do you think is the best way to solve this problem? And they really like to feel empowered to do the problem solving. And I think part of being a product manager is understanding that problem and being able to articulate it to the engineers and be as clear and precise as you can, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for logic, they're looking for reason, but they're also humans. They're looking for empathy and understanding as well. And I think that's another important thing, is to acknowledge that that software development is an extraordinarily complex job. And the way that they are going to build something is not necessarily the way that a designer is going to design, or that you would even think about it. Often what happens with engineers is I give them the big picture, and the steps in which they take to get there are, completely don't make sense to me, but it makes sense to them. So I think a big part of it, once again, is just respecting their process, and also giving engineers time to do investigations and discoveries and spikes, and really, once again, figuring out what is the best way to do it. I think as a product manager, you have to exercise a certain amount of patience, because with any new project, it's going to take time for engineers to get together and figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this? But I would just encourage every product manager to, if you can't be best friends with your lead engineer, at least have a mutual understanding and respect. And if you can have that, that's really what's going to be great at the end of the day. And the other thing you can do as a product manager to secure your relationship with engineering is to always make sure that you have a very organized list of priorities, and that you have the business case and the value proposition for each one of those clearly articulated. Because I've learned in my experience that engineers, they really want to feel like what they're working on is the most important thing. And if for some reason it's trivial, or it's not the most important thing, or you need to rearrange things, which you have to do, constantly rearrange things, that you can clearly articulate to an engineer why this has to change or why the priority changed, because they do have a tendency to get laser focused, which is great. But I do find that's another big challenge with engineers, is when you have to change direction. It can be like trying to move a huge steamship around, but it can be done if you're always prepared. That's the other part for product management, is always be prepared with the list of what's coming next.
Always be prepared. I can't think of better advice for product managers. So I just have one last question. It's a great question, if I do say so myself. Listeners of the Product Podcast will definitely recognize this one. What is the greatest lesson that product management has ever taught you?
I think the greatest lesson it's ever taught me is to be brave. There's so much involved in bravery. There's so much bravery that you have to have as a product manager. I have found myself in positions where I'm talking to CEOs and vice presidents of companies, and I have to say to them, that's not a great idea, and here's why. To be able to at any level say to somebody, here's the best path forward, here's the best idea, or here's why it's not a great idea, can be incredibly intimidating. And I have found that when I've been able to speak the truth and say, this is what we need to do as directly and tactfully as I can, it can be very powerful. I think as a product manager, we spend a lot of time figuring out what is the value, what is the customer need, what is the best user experience. And we are the voice of the customer and we are the expert. But the moment where you second guess yourself or you get afraid that, you could rock the boat by saying that's not the best idea, this is what we should do. I found as a product manager that I believe so strongly in creating the best experience that it empowers me to be able to speak up and say something, because I often think if I don't say anything, no one else will. The customer is not sitting here in front of the CEO. I'm the person who's sitting here. So I've got to be brave and I've got to say something. And I think having that caring and passion and empathy, that's one of the greatest experiences that product management has taught me, is that you are an advocate and you are a voice. And so you've got to use that voice. And the worst thing that can happen is that somebody can say, no, that's not the direction we're going in. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, I know that I've made the best decision on behalf of the customer that I could have made. And whenever I'm downloading an app and it's updated, or a website has gotten an improvement, or a better version of the iPhone has turned out, I think there's a brave product manager on the other side. There's somebody who's advocating for me. So I have to advocate just as strongly for my customers, for my product.
What wonderful advice. Well, that's so sad that we're out of time, because I could have carried this conversation on all evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad you had such a wonderful experience with Product School. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed learning from Cecilia as much as I did.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Okay, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye.